And let's see, do I have the right clicker here? So first of all, I have to be smart enough to operate the projector. That's the first rule of smart growth. Okay. All right, we got it? We're good? Okay. So when we talk about smart growth for our communities, what we're really talking about is how do we build our communities in a sustainable way? We want to keep those communities in balance when we look at economic development, population growth, quality of life, and environmental protection. For our business, smart growth means a variety of things as well. With understanding the financial value of having a smart growth neighborhood and making sure that you have the tools to lead an ongoing debate with folks within your communities. And smart growth isn't something that is just for urban communities or just for rural communities. What it is what is best for your community. How do you make sure that your development is occurring at the pace that you want to see in your community? For the future, when we talk about smart growth, we think about a new approach to how real estate is developed in our country. How much our country has changed since 1945. And the question becomes, what are you selling? You look at the house here on the slide, and it's just a random house. It could be anywhere. Depending on the market you're in, that home could be $200,000, $400,000, $600,000. However, where it's located in Seattle, that home is about $3 million. And it's not because of the house itself, it's about the community. Because that's really what we're selling. When we go out and talk to our clients about, and consumers about the homes that we have in the market, we're not just talking about the house. When we're talking about commercial opportunities, we're not just talking about the commercial building. We're talking about what that means within the context of the community. What amenities are offered? What does the community offer that makes sense for you to locate here and live in this neighborhood? Those are the types of things that we talk about when we talk about what types of real estate we are selling. Are we building the communities that we need today? This is Levittown, 1949. And does anyone remember what was happening around 1949? Post-war, that's right. World War II was ending. All the soldiers were coming back home. And what we found in our country is we had an extreme shortage of housing, an extreme shortage. So what occurred is the development of neighborhoods. And these neighborhoods had to be developed very quickly because the soldiers were coming home and starting families and they needed a place to live. So what we had is these Levittowns that were built. The neighborhoods known as Levittown, which was originated in New York, actually spread around the country, and you can go most any part of our country and find a neighborhood or many neighborhoods that are situated in a very similar way. And the question becomes, is that what we're looking for today? Do we continue to want to build those neighborhoods in the same way that we built them in 1949 for today's lifestyle? So when we look at the economic factor of smart growth, we're talking about leveraging public investments. We want to create thriving downtowns of all sizes and foster vibrant regional economies. Now, most communities, whether it's a large community or a small community, has a downtown area. And we want to focus on making sure that that downtown area is vibrant because it becomes a meeting place. It's a great place for people to come together, to have social events, to have community events, and really have everyone plug into what's going on in the community. And that's whether you live within a mile or 10 miles of that area or 20 miles, depending on the size of your community. The environmental factor. We want to make sure that we're protecting open spaces. We want to provide a variety of transportation choices. Less driving equals less pollution, which is, of course, equivalent to an improved air quality. The housing factor with smart growth. Increased variety of housing types and price points. Jobs and housing imbalance. You know, there's some communities all over our country where you just can't afford to live in the area that you work in. And it's unfortunate that we have that situation where people have to commute for multiple hours to get to their place of employment because housing opportunities just aren't there for them to be able to live within that community. We need to make sure that we are providing a scenario where people can live and work in the areas that they choose all across our country. So why isn't there more smart growth already? So land use policies certainly play a huge part in that. Federal and state infrastructure policies, and then historic lending practices. So when we look at our land use planning laws, we look at, often we've got communities that have single use zoning. So within our neighborhoods, this part of town is residential, this part of town is commercial, and the two shall never meet. That's how the zoning works in some of our communities. And minimum lot size is another issue that we deal with. Sometimes you can only build this size house on this lot, or you may only build one home, one unit per half acre or per acre. And that really stifles growth and density. And what we want to create in some neighborhoods is a higher level of density. Obviously, a high level of density isn't ideal for every neighborhood, but I think that we can all agree that we have neighborhoods within our communities that could benefit from higher density. And that's what we have to make sure that we're talking with our elected officials and those that are appointed leaders to ensure that they are crafting policy that makes sense for the lifestyles and for what we want to see in our communities today. Infrastructure and investment policies. You know, often our highway departments have changed their names around our country. They used to be called the highway department, and now they're called the transportation department. But the reality is that the thinking is still quite similar to building highways. And when your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So it's very difficult, and it's a hard road to make sure that we are helping the people that are making the decisions as it relates to infrastructure policy, to make sure that they understand that there's more to development and infrastructure than just highways. We need to make sure that we are being conscious and helping them be conscious of providing a variety of transportation choices, because the reality is not everyone wants to drive up and down the highway all the time. So let's make sure that these infrastructure policies make sense for what our clients and customers and what our communities need for today. Lending policy. As we know, throughout our history, we've had some challenges with lending policy and lenders' preference for racially homogeneous neighborhoods, lenders' preferences for having neighborhoods that are exclusively residential versus a mixed use. You know, it's very difficult for a bank, or let me rephrase that. It's very easy for bankers to say, we've got this Levittown over here, which has 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2-car garage, and 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 1-car garage homes, right? It's very easy to lend on those because they're all the same with a couple of variables. But when you've got a mixed-use development, it's very difficult for a bank to understand how that looks and how they're going to lend on this. Part of it's residential, part of it's commercial. You know, it's its own sort of being. We can't bundle this up and sell it on the secondary market because it's a unique product. So the results of that become the distance between uses are hard to navigate without a car. Walking and biking are dangerous and frustrating. Low densities are the norm. Regions tend to spread out, and the environmental costs of land accumulate. Now, when we look at builders and how they develop land, it is so much easier for a developer to find a raw piece of green space and develop that, as opposed to developing some infill housing within an already established neighborhood. So what the builders and developers do, you can't blame them for this. They'd rather take that space. They'll build the roads, they'll build the sewers and all that infrastructure and build all the homes and then dedicate it back to the city once they're done, because they don't want to take care of it. And what we do is we end up shouldering the burden of the cost of this infrastructure maintenance for the next 100 years. And we don't consider that. And the people that we elect and the people that they appoint aren't necessarily considering that either, because all too many times they're concerned about the next election. And they can easily make the point that, hey, we created this great new neighborhood out here that's 20 miles outside of the core of the community, and we've got all these new houses, we've got all this new tax base, but they're not talking about the infrastructure costs that are going to be a result of that development. And often the taxes that are being paid do not make up for the infrastructure cost that has to be taken on by the community. So these are things that we've got to think about. And we got to think about that in the long term, because yeah, it pencils great for the first 10, the first 20, maybe even 30 years. But once you start getting into 40 and 50 years, when we really have to start maintaining at a higher level and replacing some of this infrastructure, now the numbers don't make sense anymore, or they don't make as much sense anymore. And we have to make sure that we are looking at the big picture and looking at what's going to be best for our children or for our grandchildren and their children before we're making the decisions about we're going to do today. We should just definitely make sure that we're considering what's going to take place tomorrow.